I could tell Jimmy Savile was a wrong 'un, but Russell Brand completely fooled me. We should also point out that he's not been found guilty of anything.
I did sleep with a 16-year-old when I was 30, but when I was 30, I was a very different person.
But we're talking about the shoot.
Yeah.
And I feel I got a bit hoodwinked. He totally charmed me.
So when was it?
2017. It was for The Guardian. He was being interviewed by Miranda Sawyer, who's a really good writer. I've worked with her for 30 years. And I think she kind of fell under his spell too. I even brought along a copy of my book to kind of make everything go nice and smooth.
What did he do with your book?
Well, that was the first time. That was the point at which I realized that he may not be this kind of erudite, impressive intellectual. I was a fan. I was well disposed towards him. I kind of didn't like the earlier incarnation. The Russell Brand, he was like a TV presenter and a bit silly with the silly hair and everything, but he seemed to have reinvented himself.
He's reinvented himself so many times.
Absolutely. He's like a chameleon, or not a chameleon, he's like a snake shedding his skin. At the point I shot him, I thought, I did think, oh, this is, I wanted to be part of the machine that helped him do what he did, because he seemed plausible, he seemed interesting. I'd seen him being interviewed by Sam Harris.
At that time, what was his kind of shtick?
So it was at a good point in his life. He sort of left behind sort of the frivolous kind of pop, lightweight, superficial life, and he seemed to be more inclined to the spiritual and the intellectual, and that appealed to me. As I said, I brought along a copy of my book. It was really interesting because I showed him the book, and it was the wrong thing to do. He was clearly not interested. He was really good when he was talking about himself and performing, but actually extending a bit of interest to someone else or their life or something that someone else had produced. He couldn't even feign interest for a minute, So I sort of skated over it. I moved on, let's do the shoot.
Where was it?
He wouldn't be photographed at his home. He's quite protective of his family and his private life.
That's fair. Yeah.
Which is fair enough. And so we ended up shooting in this sort of spa hotel up the A40 towards Oxford. Nice location. The hotel obviously knew him and had, accommodated him before. So I set up a studio in this big room and a big backdrop, used a bit of daylight, a bit of flash. And then eventually, it was a nice day, persuaded him to come outside. And I'd found this tree that had fallen down, and some of the bark had come off the tree. So I was trying to be clever, but back then I thought that was kind of like a visual metaphor for Under the Skin, the podcast that he had. So, I was very pleased with myself.
So cheesy.
Yeah. And interestingly, at the end of the shoot, I was starting to lose him. And I've heard from other photographers that he's a pain in the ass, but he was okay to me. My friend interviewed him after me. He just happened to be there. I won't say who it is, but another journalist. He interviewed him for Esquire, and he was really pissed off because, Brand was dismissive and difficult. But the pictures at the end of the shoot where I'd lost him and he was just going through the motions are a little bit darker and I think a little bit more truthful. But at the time, I liked the pictures at the beginning because but looking back, they were kind of like PR for the Russell Brand machine, because he looks like a good looking Jesus or something. His skin was really good. His teeth were really white. He's 6'2". He's genuinely quite an impressive guy physically, intimidating. Yeah. He's used to being center of attention, and when Miranda was doing the interview and I was doing the pictures, he was the focal point, and I think he enjoys that and expects that to be the case.
So it was shot on digital, wasn't it?
Yes, it was shot on digital.
Are you happy with the pictures?
Yeah, I mean, I like the pictures, and he's comfortable in that kind of environment. Other people would be awkward and would feel that they would feel some degree of pressure, but he seems to rise to the occasion and perform. So I got loads of stuff. I just used it. Interestingly, I used my flash on one side of the Colorama, but I set up in front of a window and then went round the back of the Colorama and used the daylight coming through, and those pictures are really nice. I mean, they're great PR for him. I mean, he looks great, and he looks, as I said, he looks like the Messiah.
So good for him, but for photography fans, would you?
You know, good pictures, but maybe not true pictures.
Okay.
The pictures I like of Jimmy Savile aren't the pictures that Jimmy Savile wanted to give me. They're the pictures I got at the end. And it's the same here. And I'm not, I don't want to make a clumsy comparison between him and Jimmy Savile, but I definitely think he's, like Jimmy Savile, very good at creating a carapace, creating a skin from under which he sort of, who knows what he's really like. He's shape-shifting. He's polymorphous. He's a performer.
Do you remember any kind of conversations you had with him, or anything which was interesting?
He was entertaining. He was, as you'd expect, he was loquacious. He's good with words. He's an extremely good communicator. So you kind of, you're waiting and you're setting up your lights. It's a bit like a roller coaster being winched to the top of the roller coaster, at Alton Towers. And then suddenly he arrives and you're on the ride, and he's just taking you places, and he's performing and joking and clowning around exactly as you'd expect him to be. And at the end, you feel sort of exhilarated because you've got what you wanted. The Guardian are going to be happy. They're going to get their spread. And it's only now, knowing what we know, or don't know,
Yeah.
it makes me question what I got. And you reevaluate the pictures you took.
Do you see any of the pictures in a different light then?
Yeah. I mean, the pictures where I'm making him look pure, kind of spiritually, connected to a higher plane, serene, I think maybe are lies. I think that's part of his shtick. I don't think the pictures at the end, the darker pictures, he's in a row of conifers and it's sort of backlit slightly, and he's getting annoyed. He wants to go. I don't think they're great pictures, or they're never going to be in my portfolio, but I think they're truer. I mean, I watched the documentary, the Channel 4 documentary, and obviously, like most people, I don't watch Piers Morgan, but I'm aware of the meme of him looking through his Bible. It's clear that it's a performance, and, I don't particularly believe him, but what do I know?
Saw another clip as well when he prays. You know how some people put a hand on a Bible when you pray? He was putting a hand on his own book instead of the Bible, which
I mean, I think it's a well-trodden path, redemption through religion, and I think he's very well equipped to walk that path because he has, he's an actor more than a comedian. He's a performer. I mean, maybe he's multifaceted. I mean, maybe a part of him is moved by the majesty of our Lord.
Yeah.
But then another part of him may be more mercenary and realize that it may be a get out of jail free card, because it only takes one person, because he's going to be tried, I think, in October or November this year. It only takes one person on that jury to think that there's something plausible.
Do you think he's purposely trying to influence a future jury?
Yeah, I mean, that would just be my opinion, but I don't think...
Of course,
yeah.
Everything's opinion.
I do think it's a kind of... it's strategically clever to do that. I mean, I wouldn't say clever. It's... What I will say is that it's notoriously difficult to get a conviction for rape, and it's a way of muddying the water and making it very difficult for anyone on that jury to not know about him, or to be unaware of his huge presence. It creates kind of real moral complexity and ethical issues that I'm not sure Piers Morgan should have had him on that show, and I'm not sure that he may be able to claim that he's not going to get a fair trial.
And do you regret shooting him?
I don't regret shooting anyone. I mean, I think you want to document the cultural landscape, and just because somebody has seemingly erred or has to face the consequences, and we'll find out in due course whether he's innocent or guilty, doesn't mean that I'm not judgmental. I'm not judge and jury. I'm merely kind of trying to look at society and produce a body of work that reflects what it was like to live in these times. And in the 90s, looking back at the footage, the things that he says, they're very, very damning.
Do you regret shooting him in the light that you did, like as Jesus and stuff?
Yeah, I think it would be difficult to have shot him otherwise, because he genuinely was. He turned up and he had his beads and his sort of physical stature, and it was difficult to take a picture which was not flattering, because he was a handsome.
Yeah.
He is a handsome guy.
I guess you're just documenting.
Yeah, we're just documenting. When I shot Jimmy Savile, he is a completely objectively a strange looking individual, whereas Russell Brand is a kind of archetype of Jesus, Jesus crossed with some Dickensian picture, from Dickens.
Oh yeah.
Some kind of with his he's a complete one off. Yeah. And at that time, no one, well, particularly in the general population, no one knew what was going on.
Cool.
Or not going on.
Anything else you want to add?
Well, like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe, and we won't do a print drop of
Russell Brand.
No,
I mean, maybe I would have done in 10 years ago. But
yeah.
No.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.